Good evening and welcome to the Star Chamber Show live podcast. It is episode number 460 on a great Wednesday evening here in Central Kentucky, where I, Stephen Zimmer, am broadcasting from. So, yes, it's going to be a great episode tonight. We've been on quite a roll lately, and we've got a fantastic guest for you coming up in just a few minutes. Chat room is open, so be sure to pop in there because we definitely take comments, questions, and all that kind of good stuff. I can already see that we've got the one and only Moon, D.L. Hearn from Sacco and the Moon podcast is in there, and I also see award-winning screenwriter, author Carol Preflatish has joined us as well, and great to see we're getting underway, and our guest is in the chat room, but we'll hold off for just a few minutes to announce our guest at the proper time. And joining me on the co-hosting front tonight is the one, the only, the vivacious, the loquacious, and the audacious Holly Phillippe. But you know Holly, she's always running a couple minutes behind. She will be joining us just promptly here in just a few minutes. Of course, the Star Chamber Show is affiliated with the Imaginarium Convention now in its 12th year. And so we keep you up to date on all the good updates and so forth. I do want to say I'm going to wait till Holly gets on to talk about our experience last weekend at the Conference of Writers, because we've talked about that on a few shows. Just suffice it to say, it was great, but I will wait for Holly to come on before I talk a little bit about that. And but first, I will definitely go into the news as far as the Imaginarium updates are concerned. So yes, we've got a number of things to go over with you. From the we've got one spotlighted guest, and then we have 5 panelists, and then we have some brand new programming that has not been announced publicly, but we will go ahead and share that with you tonight. And hopefully Holly will be on by the time that I get that on. So hold on just for a moment on that. But first, we do have the return. If you were here in 2023, you saw her give a great keynote speech, and she is just fantastic. But we have editor, publisher, author, and journalist, an award-winning author, I might add, Tanita Johnson. And yes, she's the author of 25 books, 7 of which are Amazon bestsellers. I mean, she is absolutely fantastic. And Tanita will be returning to Imaginarium this July. And then on the panelist front, we've added some familiar faces and some new faces. So first of all, we've got coming back author and journalist Alan Goldstein, who has one of the best photos in all. I swear, I love his author photo. I think Holly just joined me. Hey, Holly, just want to check in
Yeah,
with you and say hi. There you are.
I made
You
it.
are
I
aboard.
made it. I was trying to
Made it.
get in, but I couldn't find the link. So
No, no. Well, I'm just going over some of the Imaginarium updates right now, and then we can tell everybody about the Conference of Writers and how that went. And then I held off, of course, on the brand new programming that you shared with me right before the show. So just going over the new additions to our guest list. But yes, author and journalist Alan Goldstein, of course, check that author photo of him out with the
the
mountain lion
best
in the background. I just
that we
love
have
that
ever
author
got.
photo. I love that author photo. All-time classic at the Imaginarium
It
convention.
doesn't matter how old Alan gets; that will always be his author photo.
Yeah, he's probably tired of us using
So
that
he's
one now,
he's
but
stuck with it.
yeah, it's just too good to pass up, especially for cat people like us. And then we also have author T.L. Shively joining us, which I'm really excited about. T.L. is going to be in the vendor hall, and she is going to be a first time panelist with the Imaginarium convention. Really excited to have her aboard. And then returning for the first time since I think it was 2019 that they were last with us. But yes, we've got the great author, filmmaker, screenwriter, and comic creator John Morgan Risner. And
Yes.
John is just awesome. And along with him, of course, is author, filmmaker, screenwriter, and artist Oneric Roper. Oneric Roper, yes, he is great, and the two of them are just superb. I mean, they are just great panelists.
Yeah,
They
they are.
great workshops. I know John is going to be giving a workshop for us for sure, and that's
Yes.
going to be worked out with Holly. But they are just awesome. but they haven't been able to make it for a few years, but they are both coming back in July. And then also joining us for the very first time is author Jonathan Walson. And Jonathan is also in our expo as well. And so, yeah, we got a lot of folks added aboard in last week. New spotlighted guests, 5 new panelists, and a couple of them coming for the first time, a couple of them coming back after a few years. And so, yeah, it's definitely a great group to be able to share with you tonight. And so, yes, I'll go over real quick to the new programming additions. Holly has given me the clearance to add or announce publicly tonight. Clockwork Cannons, Navigating the Gears and Glory of Steampunk Writing. That's going to be a panel, obviously, about the world of steampunk. So, yeah, I know Holly's
Yes.
excited. All things Victorian.
I had to get that one added because sure as I don't, people would be like, "Where's the steampunk?" And of course, it's one of my favorites. So yeah,
Yes.
I have to get that added.
And then officially, it has been announced now. We are going to have a live edition of Vamp Chat with Dan and Eva. That's hosted by
Yes.
Dan Lefstad and Eva Vertris. Both of them are exceptional authors. Dan is also a great publicist, but they are going to be hosting a Vamp Chat live podcast at Imaginarium on Saturday evening that
It will
week.
be, yeah, it will be like right after the award ceremony. So it's going to be like in between. So right after award ceremony, before the music and all that starts. So yeah,
Mhm.
everybody check it out. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, that's going to be something else. I guarantee you. And then on the workshop front, well, one is actually a little bit of an event, but it also has a little bit of a workshop component, and that is going to be the Rapture at Silver Coin. It's an audio movie world premiere that's going to be followed by an extensive
Yes.
Q&A with the writer Devin Hilton and the director Tim Miller. And of course, Devin and Tim are both spotlighted guests at Imaginarium, and we are very honored that they're going to be doing their world premiere of this new audio movie, The Rapture at Silver Coin. And so
And
if you're
and I
wondering
have to add, I've been talking to Tim and Devin both today. They are super pumped. They have put literal blood, sweat, and tears into this. Devin is praising Tim, saying, Tim was the director, Tim Miller. Devin Hilton is the writer, and Devin says that Tim just went way above and beyond on this. That it's
what,
just amazing what he did. So I'm excited. I cannot wait. I think it's a newer um addition to the film world.
Mhm,
It's audio, but yet it's film. So it's like a crossover.
mhm.
It reminds me of like the old H.G. Wells like radio shows and stuff, but this is a
Audio
little
plays,
different.
yeah,
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 this
it's
is a little different.
a little
So
bit
yeah,
different.
I'm
Yeah,
very curious.
it is an audio project, audio
Yeah.
medium. So, yeah, just don't want to make sure you don't get confused on that. But it will be, of course, we will be talking about it as part of the film festival, and then, of course, as part of our programming. So, be able to be sure to catch that. And then we also have the amazing Ren Million coming to give a great workshop called "Build Out Your Book, Make Your Promotion Uniquely Yours." And it's going to be great. It's creative ways to market your book and using promotional materials and all kinds of stuff. So, and of course, she Renmillion, also known as Anna Maria Salvaggio, is an illustrator, author, designer, and editor with 4 decades of experience. So this is going to be a really cool, a very immersive workshop. It's actually a
Yes.
2 hour workshop, so lot to do there. And then we also have we will be getting a description of this and on the there, but I want to go ahead and mention it. But
Go ahead.
Barbarians at the Gate, book banning and what it means for writers, from Elizabeth Donald. She will be the presenter. She was also our Writer Wednesday writer today. So yeah,
Woohoo.
congratulations to Elizabeth. But yes, she has a workshop and it's going to focus on the world of book banning. Of course, that was a topic we recently covered on the show here. So yeah, very important to us, and we're glad we have that coming onto our programming officially. So yeah, I think that's all the updates I have for you. But all that's
Yes,
new.
yes.
Yeah.
I I'll say I have been working on plugging in programming. So I'm doing scheduling. Once that is finished, all my workshops are finished. plug them in. I will be rounding out the panels. So if anybody's got a wondrous panel idea that we're not already covering, hey, shoot me a message. DM me on Facebook. That's where I get most of mine quicker. If you do it on Instagram, I'm not going to get it for a week or so or more. So do it on Facebook. I'm there every day. But yeah, I'll take any idea, any subject matter you think we need to touch on, and go from there. But hey, I'm all ears because we are here for you.
Mm,
This is
absolutely.
your all's convention. This is your all's chance to network and learn. And so, discuss current things going on in the bookie world, film world, game world. So let me know what you definitely want to cover. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's about it because it's going to be a busy month here. Um, Metalbeck, I'll go ahead and put the announcement out there. Metalbeck is actually happened to have a brain surgery. It's a small, but it's still brain surgery. Okay, um, and that'll be toward the end of the month. So the 22nd is actually the day she has that.
Of
So
May. Yeah, of
I'm
May.
trying to get most things rounded out before that because obviously it's going to be a little upside down for a few weeks during her recovery. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing, and just staying busy.
Yep. Gonna be very, very busy. So, yes, and so I want to briefly, very quickly, because I don't want to go overlap into our guest time too much, and I still have to recognize the folks that brought you tonight's show. But Holly and I had a great time at the Conference of Writers. It was fantastic.
Yes, we
Uh,
did.
the organization of it, of course, was impeccable as always. I spent an entire day mentoring writers, and I had a great group of writers that I got to meet and help throughout the day. And then I was also included on a panel. So I didn't even get to see our table much, but Holly and Bentley were out there at the table, and they also met and talked with a lot of writers. And
Oh, great people.
it was great. And this was the best one yet. Keeps getting better every year. Highly recommend it. Next year will be their 5th year, and it's put on by the Bluegrass Writers Coalition. But it was absolutely a great experience. I think Holly had a great day too.
I did, and we're proud new members of the Bluegrass Writers
Yes,
Coalition.
yeah, we're
So
officially
we'll be
members.
doing more with them in the
Mhm.
coming year, which we're excited about because it's a great organization. There is no membership fees. Virginia Smith's always wanting us to pass this on. There's no membership fees. If you are a Kentucky writer or you used to be a Kentucky and now you've
Or
moved
have
away,
Kentucky connections, or
or
have
you have
Kentucky
Kentucky
connections.
connections of
You
any
can join.
kind.
You
It
can
could
join.
be family, whatever,
Yeah.
friends, whatever, or you write about Kentucky, whatever, just a Kentucky connection, you can join.
Yep.
And you just go to the Bluegrass Writers Coalition website and just shoot her an email. Tell her, hey,
Mhm,
I'm interested in joining
mhm.
because there is Zoom meetings. You don't have to be at like every single meeting through the month. They have a couple a month, but you don't have to be there every single meeting. And like I said, some of them are Zoom. So yeah, you can live on the East or West
Yeah.
Coast and still be a member.
Great group, great event. So I'm going to get into our folks that brought you tonight's show right now. And that would be Sandy Linder, the genre blender, and the fine folks at Per Bostet Publications. So I'll go with Per Bostet first tonight, and then we'll go over to Sandy, and definitely give both of them your support. They are just fabulous supporters of the writing community. Per Bostet Publications is a small press based in the Louisville metro area, specializing in speculative fiction and other outside the box books. With 40 titles in print and ebook formats and a handful of audiobooks, Per Bostet offers a little bit of everything. Check out Frenemies in Space, Marian Allen's new science fiction short story collection featuring return character Smartmouth Connie Phelan. Or try Michael Dabney's latest David Blaze mystery, A Deadly Game, a prequel set in 1984 Philly. You can find these titles and more at perbostetpublications.com, at Amazon, or you can find the press in person at Kentucky and Indiana book fairs and conventions. Per Bostet Publications, where timeless tales unfold. So thank you to T. Lee Harris. Sarah Marion recently got married to Michael Ignacio, which is
Congrats.
great. Again, congrats on that. And of course, Marian Allen. And so here's a little bit from Sandy. Great book that she's talking about in this one. I can vouch for it.
Are you a creative person working a 9 to 5 job to survive? Let's look at how to keep your energy and joy alive with the new motivational business book, Capture Your Dream, from author Sandy Lender. In Capture Your Dream, Sandy offers stories, lessons, inspiration, SWOT analysis, goal stacking strategies, and more to help you map your plan to achieve a dream job or side hustle. As a creative herself, Sandy knows it takes compromise and commitment to keep the day job to survive while chasing the dream to thrive. Assess your dragon score. Learn more about Capture Your Dream at authorsandylender.com.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sandy Lender, the genre blender. She is absolutely awesome. So, yeah, I'm going to roll right into our introduction for tonight. And tonight's guest got his start writing humorous greeting cards and penning one liners for Joan Rivers. And now he is an award winning author and screenwriter who won a 2024 Imagine Award for the novel 28 Years Haunted. He's also published many short stories and a recent novella collection, Eye for an Eye, currently writing a new horror novel and developing projects for film and television. He is a panelist at Imaginarium and also will be appearing in the expo. And it is my honor and pleasure to bring aboard the Star Chamber show for the very first time, the one, the only B.D. Prince.
Hey,
Right
Steven.
there you are. How's it
Hey,
going?
Holly. Hope you can hear me okay. How you guys doing?
Hear you great.
Great. We
Doing
got
good.
you. I hear you loud and
Yeah,
clear.
loud and
Excellent.
clear.
Excellent. Thank you for having me, inviting me on the show.
No,
Well, of
it's great
course.
to have you. Yeah,
I can believe it's
definitely.
your first time.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it does.
I know.
That's kind of what surprises me because we have a lot of mutual friends, and I've known, of course, your work for a long time, and I'm glad that things worked out for you to come in person this year. We mentioned, you won an Imagine Award last year, and so yeah, it's just great that we finally finally got around to it, having you on the Star Chamber. So
Yes,
that's
yeah. And
great.
here's the problem. Now I'm jinxing myself. If I'm going to show up, I'm not going to win anything.
Well, I'm
Oh
not a
no!
judge.
Don't jinx
Yeah,
yourself now. Don't say that. Don't even put that out in the universe.
yeah, yeah.
Don't put it
Don't put
out
that
there.
out there.
He retracts that, universe. He retracts
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I can't give you any insight because both Holly and myself are recused from the judging side of that. But yes, well, I'm sure that with the quality of your writing, you're contending just as strong. I'm sure of it. So, but how have you been now? Bring us up to date on the world of your world.
Yeah, actually, there's been some big changes in the last few months. So I grew up originally in Michigan and moved to California to pursue a screenwriting career and to get a tan. And and then end up finding my wife and raising a family. And then just last late September, I moved back to Michigan, and my dad's getting up there in years. I wanted to be close by him to help, take care of him and everything, and
Hmm.
hit the ground running with my book tour for Eye for an Eye. And so that was really exciting to see how much support I got from independent bookstores around Michigan and elsewhere. So now I'm getting my roots here and trying to connect with the Michigan writers and booksellers and even filmmakers here.
Yeah, and as we mentioned, of course, you won the Imagine Award for your novel, or not for the not for 28 Years Haunted, and this Eye for an Eye is a novella collection. So I wanted to give you a chance to talk about Eye for an Eye as far as the genres in it. What's in it?
Yeah, thanks. So this is a fun one. Um, it's a pair of novellas with the common theme of eye for an eye. So there are some sweet revenge tales. When I wrote them, I had no idea that these would ever be paired together. Um, but after writing them both, I started to see how many parallels there were. Again, with that common theme of eye for an eye, and there's also eyes that are featured in both stories. But the really compelling and fun part about writing these was that I'm looking at the same theme, but from two very disparate points of view. So, for example, the first story, Committed, um, it's about a 1950s housewife. she suspects her husband's having an affair. And so then she begins to struggle to prove her suspicions and her sanity. Is he gaslighting her, or is she really crazy like her mother, as her husband likes to say? Well, back in the 50s, you a man could just drop his wife off at the local asylum, and they would just take her, and you're at their mercy. So it gets dark from there, but it has a nice, sweet revenge at the end. But that's a really fun one. And that was a quarterfinalist in the Screencraft Cinematic Short Story Competition. So it was nice making it that far. And then the self-titled story novella, Eye for an Eye, is about two college sophomores that are going on a cross-country road trip to their Ivy League college from, they're coming from the LA area. And so they end up getting to the point where their Prius is running out of fuel. And, as you guys know, when you make those cross-country road trips, you come to these crossroads that lead to nowhere, and you're getting low on fuel. You're like, well, maybe the next one. You're looking for a sign. And finally they see this old weathered sign on the side of the road that says gas and grub, and it's like, again, in some of these areas, like, is this even still open? Does anybody even live here anymore? But, you get desperate enough. It's like, I got to take this turn, or, we're going to be dead in the water. And so then they discover that how the wrong decision in the wrong town could mean the difference between life and death or something far worse. And it was also made the quarterfinals of the Screencraft Cinematic Short Story Competition just this year. So
Nice.
Yeah, so it was really fun to look at from those two different points of view, from a 1950s housewife to Gen Z college students. It's just, you couldn't get more different.
Just crossing off all those T's. Yes. We got to jump around a little bit, you don't want to get monotonous, you got to jump around and always dive in. That's what we always tell people. Don't get comfortable, try to write outside your genre, try to write something different once in a while, or read something out of your genre, or, you don't want to, be a one-trick pony, as they say. So that's awesome.
As you know, if you've read any of my writing, you can never get too comfortable.
There you go. That's the idea. That's the good stuff. So are you looking to actually turn these into like a series or some kind of feature film?
Well, they are both, like you said, like I mentioned, that they, were quarterfinalists in the cinematic prose or short story competition. So I kind of started my writing really, again, from a screenwriting perspective. So my writing is very visual. So as you're reading it, my goal is for you to see the movie playing in your head. So everything I write, I pretty much envision as a film. So, and I have actually, well, I guess I can say it now. I have a short story collection that should drop in the fall. And one of the short stories already, I was in talk. I just met this director just last week, and we started talking. And I sent him a short film script that I had just written, and he's like, his first words are like, "Damn!" And it's a brutal gut punch. It's short, but it's just, dang, it's twisted. And so he's like, "Oh my gosh, this, I got to make this." So we're in talks of turning this into a short film, and he's like, he goes, "Man, I can see the movie playing in my head." He's kind of like, "Okay, I already have some actors that I'm thinking about for this role and this role," and that's like, all right. So we'll see where it leads. You know how that goes, but yeah, it's, again, the visual medium, whether it be prose or film, that playing that movie in your mind. So conveying what's in my head into your head, which is a kind of scary proposition.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what we always talk about. It's so hard. Do you find it difficult then, because you said you're so visual with your words, so to speak, to give people that mind's eye view of what you're seeing with your prose? Do you find it extremely difficult then when you switch brains and go back to, oh gosh, I gotta screenwrite this, so I've got to cut out like 99%? I mean, do you find that difficult, or I mean, I'm
Well,
sure you've got tricks.
oh, that's a great question. So I have pretty much for the last several years have been bouncing back and forth between screenwriting and prose. So there's no one way to kind of break into Hollywood. So I recommend the all the above approach. Whether because selling spec scripts is much tougher even now, but because everybody wants IP, they don't want to take any chances. They want something that's already out there, and some
Right.
of the producers and executives just don't have a clue. But if you can show it to them, or they see that this already has an audience, then they're risk averse and they're more willing to take a chance. So that what kind of led me back into writing prose, and then by writing. And it's kind of funny, as Stephen mentioned, I got my start actually writing humorous greeting cards and one-liners. So including those ones that I sold to Joan Rivers. And so, I mean,
Right.
that's about as tight as you can get, right? And so
Right.
I've kind of gone backwards. I started from really tight writing and then went into screenwriting and then to short stories. And, again, short stories, the sweet spot's like what, 3,000 to 5,000 words, and you have a much better chance of selling something at 3,000. So that discipline of having to write so concise, again, with the screenwriting and short story has really helped when it comes to, again, jumping back and forth between genres. So for me, going to more longer form, it's in some ways more freeing, because then it's like I'm not
Right.
laboring over every single word quite as much. It's like, I've got 3,000 words and I can't use this adverb, or I can't talk about this. Like, you got to cut it down
Right.
so tight. It can be challenging. So, but having so much experience writing, in those other mediums, has actually been helpful.
Yeah, well, that's good that you started out. Like you said, you started out that way. For those who start writing prose and then jump over,
Oh,
yeah, it's tough. It's tough to learn.
Mhm.
Oh, I got to pull back. I
Yeah.
want to say this and this and this and this. I want to paint this picture, but gotta pull back.
Mhm.
Instead of
kill your darlings, kill them.
a paragraph,
Cut, cut,
I've
cut.
got a sentence.
So I'm actually finding myself now again, getting into novellas and longer works that where now I'll go back in, and it's kind of again, it's like the opposite. So instead of writing something and then taking as much away, I'm actually
Uh-huh.
going and being able to embellish and add, so I can add more of those, the atmosphere and dig a little bit more into location, and of course, each medium has its own strengths. So when it's a
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
prose, you can really explore the internal conflict. What are they thinking in that? But when it's your
Mhm.
screenwriting, if you can't see it or hear it, it's pointless to put on the page unless it's maybe a little nod to the actor that, okay, here's what you're feeling on the inside. Now I need you to emote that somehow.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
So then you have to visually express what's going on internally, where in prose you can delve in there, but there's also hazards on both sides, right? Where you get to some writers of prose that it's like, I really don't care that much about their wardrobe. I really don't. It's
Yeah.
like, tell me more about that chambray shirt he's wearing and the Dockers, and they go on for like paragraphs on their hair and their eyes, and it's like,
Mhm.
get to the action.
Right. Get to the point. Get to the
Right?
point. Yeah.
Cut to the chase.
Well, that's why
Literally.
I was talking about this, I think, with our guest last week, is if you look at the old Stephen King and
Hmm.
compare it to the new, you'll see the vast difference in his structure of the way he describes things. He was extremely descriptive and would go on and on and on back in the
Ad
day,
nauseum.
right? Yeah, now, oh man, it's got a lot tighter. He's getting the point
Mhm.
across, like you said. It's more concise, right?
Mhm.
He's carefully choosing his words
Mhm.
and not over embellishing, and yeah, you could really see the growth there. So
Yeah,
yeah,
purple
there,
prose is just painful for me. They just
yeah,
like, All right, like authorial intrusion or whatever they call that, where it's just like, okay, you're showing off. I now suddenly you pulled back the veil, and I see the wizard behind there. I see the author trying to show off, and it's like, if you choose the right verbs and the right adjectives, you don't have to go on page after page. And it's funny too, like when you mentioned Stephen King, I always used to tell people like, well, once you get past the first 100 pages or so, it gets really good.
Right.
Right.
That's so
Yep.
true.
So,
That's so
so
true.
personally, I prefer his short fiction.
Mhm.
That's just me,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I love the short form anyway. From Bradbury to Matheson to Roald Dahl. I mean, all the greats. I mean, I've always been a big fan of short fiction.
Yeah, me too. And it's an art of writing. Short fiction is in
Yeah.
and of itself. But one thing I always say is I love the novella. I think it's a very
Yes.
underrated medium in terms of writing because it does give a little more room to breathe. It does bring in a little more of that room that you get in a novel, while at the same time still requires you to be concise. But it does allow a little bit broader on story arcs and setting and things like that because you have a little more space to work with whereas in of course the short story you really have to get to the point and get going and get to things quick. And
Yeah,
so
again, limit
I
yourself
love the
to
novella.
basically one scene or one event, or at least
Yeah.
a tight sequence. You can only get, and then sometimes you're like, oh, I want more. So sometimes I'll actually
Yeah.
purposely leave a short story with the kind of an open ending, so that way, it's like the reader can then carry on like what they think is going to happen next. But it's interesting
Mhm.
when you mentioned the novella being a great form. It actually lends itself to. Being turned into a screenplay better than a novel does. Because with a
Mhm.
novel, you have
Right.
to cut so much, and want to make sure you cut the right
Um,
stuff. Now, if somebody's like rambles on, you're like, okay, well, that's really easy. I can cut all that stuff off in some of these superfluous rabbit trails. But from a length perspective, novellas translate really well to film, to a script
I agree.
size.
A larger short story or a novella really do
yes.
adapt well. And I always like as well, since you are a horror writer, I will use the example The Midnight Meat Train by Clive Barker, which because he's one of
Yes.
my, of course, my favorite authors. And I
That
thought that
was
that was
wild.
a pretty fun adaptation. But again,
Yeah.
because they were able to make a feature from a piece of short fiction and didn't have to cut out a lot in doing
Right.
so. And
Right.
Vinnie Jones was great in that one as
Yeah.
a feature of that. But
Carol.
yeah, but you're
Carol.
right.
Oh, I was going to say Carol Preflattish in the chat room. She said she's going in the opposite direction. We was talking about from prose to screenwriting. She said she's writing a book from one of her screenplays, and it's just as hard to add the scenes for the book. I'd imagine it is.
Yes, for sure.
I'd imagine.
But and it's kind of interesting too when you think about again making that transition or translating from one medium to another, but even going from someone who's an outliner versus pantser. So a lot of
Mhm.
novelists tend to be a lot of them are more pantsers, as they kind of have to write their way into it, and that's where you kind of ramble a bit at the beginning and stuff. But one of the tricks that I figured out just on my own was that when well, again, depending on what I'm writing, sometimes most time I like to know the ending, but sometimes I've had a couple where I didn't know and I just kind of wrote until I figured it out or whatever. But I recommend that actually, if you take going from a novel to a screenplay, to actually go back and outline it. So if you didn't have an outline to start with, to take your book and then outline it, and then it makes it real easy to go back and go, okay, now those are the scenes or the sequences, and then for each of those, you're like, well, do I need this? And do these two outline points or these two scenes are they actually performing the same function? Like this one shows that this person is really desperate, and then I have another scene like right after it that also basically does the same thing, but it's just in a different way. Now, sometimes you're wanting to reinforce something, so you can do a little bit of that, but a lot of times you're looking for something to cut. That's a great way to do it.
Good tip. Yeah,
Very
absolutely.
good. Very good
And
tip.
Yeah, because you can cut an entire scene or, or chapter or whatever, and you realize like, well, maybe, and this is funny, like, again, speaking of Stephen King, he was talking about, in his book, where his wife was, on writing, he's saying like, he's going on, she's like, well, I think he kind of cut this. And he's like, well, don't you think they want to know what he did for when he was in college, and stuff like that? She goes, well, I don't know, maybe they do, but it doesn't mean maybe you do, but it doesn't mean you have to bore me with it. Is it really relevant to the story? If not, cut it.
Cut it. Yes, I'm in agreement there. Don't ramble on. Don't waste your reader's time. Don't waste, a room on the page when you
That's
could
right.
write,
It's good to
something
ramble on
terrific.
as if you're Led Zeppelin.
There you go.
I see what you did there.
Yes.
Nice.
Sounds great.
But I know that Holly definitely enjoyed one of Stephen King's latest called Holly.
Yes, I did.
Yes.
Oh, when I seen he was coming out with that book, I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
all right, Stephen, I ain't read you in several years, but here we go.
Yeah, you suckered me in.
You suckered me in, and now I had to order Mr. Mercedes, and I'm going to have to start on that after Imaginarium. I ain't going to have time now, but after Imaginarium.
Right. Yeah.
I got to finish my new Hunger Games right now.
Yep. Absolutely. But yes, but you've written in all these mediums. I love it because you've done short stories, novel length novellas, screenplays. So yeah, I love the fact that you have written in all these different spheres. Which is your personal favorite sphere to write in of all those at the moment?
Can you pick?
Can you pick one that really
question?
enjoy the most?
They all have their own challenges, but like I said, since I'm such a visual person, I love screenwriting. So even when I'm writing a short story, a novella, novel, whatever, I'm still seeing it as a movie. And so I'm always looking for that to be it. However, the actual process of writing, because it has to be so terse and so tight, when it comes to screenwriting, it can be really tough. But, you have to go back with the machete there and just keep hacking away and carving it down to get as tight. But, when you've done enough of it, it makes it a little bit easier to say, okay, how can I say the most amount in the fewest words? And there are a couple of good tips. One again is always choosing the best verb. And so, just an example from that short story that I was just in discussions about having made into a short film. There was a scene they're talking about how, and I don't give too much away, but the victim, her attacker, removed her eyes. Okay. So she's bandaged and she's got the gauze over there, and you see like the dried blood where her eyes should be, and it's a great visual. But when I went back to describe it, I went back and didn't say that he removed her eyes. I said he carved out her eyes. So that visual, when they're carved out, I mean, now you're seeing it happening, and that's just so in your mind's eye. So really all you're seeing on the screen is gauze bandages with dried blood. But, when they're actually describing, the bastard carved out her eyes, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
Oh, yes.
And it's just one word,
The right word choice makes all the difference in the world. Yeah, absolutely.
One other quick tip too. I like to recommend for anyone who's translating to film, and like I said, it's all about the visual. There is a book out there called the Emotional Thesaurus or Emotion Thesaurus. If you guys have heard of that, there it is, right on my bookshelf there. The Emotion Thesaurus by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. Yeah, it's the Emotion Thesaurus. And what's great about that, it's just a great resource where you can say, all right, someone is angry. Well, how do they emote that? How do you show that you're angry? Right? So are you balling up your fists? Are you shaking? Are you red in the face? So when you're screenwriting, you're not just going to say the actor looks angry. well, what is that? That's ridiculous.
Mhm.
But if you just specifically say what you're seeing or what they're acting, the shaking, whatever it is, that
Mhm.
plays on the page and plays on the screen.
Mhm. And that also can reduce adverbs as well. When
Yes.
you selectively choose a good word like that. And if you're falling into that ly trap, now I'm definitely my favorite authors of all time have used ly words. So I'm not one of those people that says don't use ly words. But some people do get a little too carried away, and that definitely can help. When you choose a more concise option like you're talking about. But I do want to get into one topic, and what I'm going to bring up because
Yes.
Holly is just waiting for this one. She's waiting for this
Chomping
one,
at the bit.
but but getting into the paranormal and ghost hunting,
Yes.
because this is something that's right up Holly's alley, and I know that she's going to want a few minutes to talk with you about that. But yeah, tell us a little bit about your activity in that area. So go, and Holly, be ready.
Well, it's funny because I went into it as a skeptic. I mean, I'm a man of faith, so the spiritual realm that doesn't, I have no problem believing in the spiritual realm, right?
Mhm.
However, actually, like ever having an experience with something from the other side, total skeptic. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about, if Aunt Gertrude is still hanging around.
Mhm.
But you'll love this. My first paranormal experience I had was at the Stanley Hotel.
Nice,
Nice.
nice.
Yes. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, that was the inspiration for Stephen King's The Shining when he stayed there, and he had experiences there in that infamous room 217. In the book, it's room 237, but the actual room at the hotel is 217. And so I was there at a horror writers retreat, and Jack Ketchum was there.
Nice.
Nice.
A young, fresh-faced Josh Mallerman was there. Bird Box had just come out,
Mhm.
and
Nice.
and I forget who else was there, but they were the two ones that stood out. So anyway, it's about 11:30 at night. I'm standing behind the grand staircase, talking to a traveling nurse who's telling me, and a writer, and she's telling me, she goes, "I think I'm a ghost magnet." I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, she travels, as a traveling nurse to some of these really old hospitals, and some of them she has to go, like, traverse through the basement, past the morgue, and she says she sees shadow people and stuff. And she
Uh-huh.
goes, I think I'm a ghost magnet. And it was shortly after she mentioned that again, we're standing facing each other, that all of a sudden I was pushed from behind. Now, it
Uh-huh.
was like, when you're in high school and you're standing there, your legs locked out, and somebody pushes the back of your knee and it
Mhm.
buckles? It
Yep.
was like that.
Mhm.
I felt something push the back of my thigh hard enough to buckle my knee. And so I looked down and I'm thinking, okay, it's one of the other writers punking me, right? Just trying to come up behind me and, and have some fun. And I turned and I looked behind my knee and I turned all the way around and there was nobody there. And I quickly spun around, looked back at Kathleen, and I'm like, tell me, like some little kid came up and behind me and ran off, or a dog jumped up on me or something. And she's standing there facing me. And so if anybody had come up, she would have seen it. Plus, I looked both ways. There's no way they could have gotten away without me seeing them.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm like, oh my gosh, so again, to be physically shoved like that by an invisible force, I'm like, all right, maybe there's something here. So then I'm thinking, like, wait, she said she's a ghost mag. I'm like, maybe they're trying to get to her and I was just in their way. And he's like, bonk, ran into me.
Well, I am a ghost magnet. So I call it clairvoyance and a mediumship, but I've always been. That's what I tell
Yes.
people. It wasn't like something just turned on. And that's why I love skeptics, because I'm like, I could see where you come from. You gotta see it or feel it to believe it, right? It's hard. It's
Yep.
hard to imagine. But I've never known a time where they wasn't a part of my life. I mean, from
Mm.
growing up on, I've had experiences and been touched and bothered and things moved, and and talking to me, and I see them. So I mean, it's never, when me and Steve first got together many moons ago, I warned him. I said, Stephen, I don't know if you're a skeptic or whatever, but I'm telling you, I'm a medium, I'm clairvoyant. Things will start happening. And when we move in together, things will start happening. You will hear things. You will see things that you've never heard or seen before. And just trust me on this. I'm just warning you. That's all. And he has. I mean, the
Yeah.
the first time, I'll tell you the quick story was we was in the bedroom watching something on television. And there was a few of them out in the hall. What you could hear people chattering, but you couldn't make out what they were saying. It was people talking. You could hear the voices. And
Yeah.
Stephen looks at me and says, "Do you hear that?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's the ghost." And
Yeah.
he's like, "No, there's somebody in this house, Holly. There's somebody in this house." I said, "No, they're
So Steve was
dead.
like,
They're I'm like, there's nobody alive beside me and you in this house and a cat. No, they are dead." And he gets up, gets a weapon, and going through the house, and he's like, "Holly, there's somebody in this house." So I'm walking along with him, saying, "No, Stephen, they're dead." And he's like, "But I heard them so clear."
yep.
So yeah, when you
Yeah,
have
and
your
it was
first
not
few,
TV. It was not in the TV. I mean,
no,
you
no, he
know the
turned it off. Yeah,
difference. You know when you hear a voice in the house,
yeah.
people talking in the house. It's a distinct difference. And yeah, this it was definitely voices that I heard, and it was just
Uh,
right after she came. So it's kind of like I guess that's she triggered them somehow to have a
I do.
conversation.
I'm like a
But
a light bulb.
it's
We'll go into the store and I'll be like, "Hey, so and so's
yeah,
grandmother's following them, or so and
yeah,
so's this relative's
yeah,
following them, or a pet, or
mhm,
And Steve's like, "Oh, okay, he's used to it now."
yeah.
He just goes on. But yeah, most people would be like, "What are you talking about, woman?" Yeah.
Now
I
since
think we
then,
need to tell the men in the
how's
white
your pet?
coats.
Right.
So did that open up something for you? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
have you had more experiences?
I have. So again,
Mhm.
that was my first experience. I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily the first, but it's the first one that was just incontrovertible, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I had an experience when I was like 5 years old, when I was walking to my bedroom to take a nap, and I swear I saw this old lady walking past the window, and then turned and looked at me, and it scared me so bad, my knees buckled, and I just fell to the ground, and I screamed for my
Mhm.
mom, and she came, and then but we didn't have like an old lady neighbor, and she looked out there and didn't see anybody. And then I'm thinking like, well, maybe it's just I saw my own reflection. I'm like, no, wait, the room was dark. It was light outside. It was daytime, so
And
the
you don't
reflection
look
was on
like
the
an
other
old woman.
side. Yeah, right. And I don't look like an old woman. I was 5. So then I was just
Mhm.
like, well, just my imagination. I saw a reflection or something like that. So just those things you see something out of the corner of your eye, you just write it off. Like, yeah, it's just my
Mhm.
imagination. So I have a warped imagination, as you know. Um, but the second time that I had, just no other way no natural explanation for it. And I kind of brought this on myself because I was on a paranormal investigation at an abandoned asylum here in Michigan. So I guess I kind of asked it for it. But I was there with Bridget Marquardt, if you're familiar with her from the Ghost Magnet podcast. She's a
Mm.
former playmate and was one of the stars of The Girls Next Door. She's one of Hefner's old girlfriends. Anyway,
Oh,
she
okay.
had a podcast for years called the Ghost Magnet podcast. And so, kind of quickly back to the Stanley Hotel horror writers retreat, I met her producer there, Rob Cohen, and so we kind of kept in touch over the years. And he had mentioned that Bridget was coming to Michigan. And her brother had moved to Traverse City, yada yada. And she was going to go and do a show up in Traverse City, which is northern Michigan, at the kind of the top of the mitten there. And so he's like, you're from Michigan, maybe you can, help her out or whatever. So I did my best, but it ended up falling through. But then she comes back and goes, well, I'm also going to be visiting this place called Eloise, which is in the Detroit area. And for me, growing up as a kid, everybody knew Eloise. That was the loony bin, right? And so just hearing that
Right.
name just sent chills up my spine, right? And I'm like, well, hell yeah, I want to go on a parallel investigation at an abandoned asylum that haunted my
Why
childhood.
not?
What's the worst that could happen?
It's right, right.
So anyways, I was there with Detroit Paranormal Expeditions, and they were the ones that were actually kind of leading the investigation. And I invited Josh Mallerman and Allison to come out because I figured they would have a hoot. That would be fun. So they came out, And if you've never seen Josh scared, it's poetry. It's gorgeous. It was good. It's so funny. Somebody who writes such dark fiction, he is the biggest scaredy cat.
That's
So
great.
anyways, we're on the second floor, and I'm walking down the hallway, and I got to this one point in the hallway where all of a sudden it's like I hit this imaginary wall, and the best way to describe this is I felt like the air was sucked out of my lungs. I got to that point and went, and it was the weirdest thing. It's like all the air was sucked out of my lungs. And I'm like, what the heck? And so I was there. My wife was there with me too. So like any good husband would do, I said, she was at the other end of the hall. I'm like, hey, honey, come down here. And so, 'cause I want to see if she experienced the same thing or is it just me? And I swear, she comes walking toward me. I didn't say a word to her. She comes walking down and she gets to that same spot in the hallway. And I see her go, and I'm like, what happened? And she described the exact same sensation.
Somebody was probably undead there.
I don't know. But then it gets
That's
weirder.
weird.
It actually gets weirder. So then I noticed that this was the kind of the administrative. Well, it had been turned into the administrative section right before it closed, and I noticed that the room numbers all started with it's a second floor 200. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna look for room 217, right? Why not?
Uh-huh.
And so I get to the end of the hallway, and sure enough, there's room 217. And so my wife and I go in there, and she had noticed this same window when we were down on the ground looking up, and the curtains were like pulled to the side, almost like someone was looking out, And so we wanted to check it out, see if we could debunk it. And sure enough, somebody had tied it off to the side. Like, okay, all right, see, debunked. There's no ghost in here looking out the window, right? So anyway, so she goes to take a picture from the opposite perspective, looking down. And she pulls out her phone and it won't work. The screen's black. It just like goes dead on her. And, she's like, I know the battery is charged and everything. And she's messing with the message. She tried to turn it off and everything. And she finally gets it back up and working again. And so by this time, I've looked around. I'm bored. And so the rest of the group had already worked their way down to the other side of the hallway. So I leave, but my wife was still kind of left her back there, which I shouldn't have. But so anyway, so I'm walking down the hallway, about halfway down, all of a sudden I hear, Brian! And she's like screaming. I'm like, oh my gosh, I go booking it down there to find out what happened. She goes, tell me you're just in here. Tell me you just stepped out the hallway. I'm like, no, I'm like halfway down the hall. She goes, I swear to God, she could feel me standing look over her shoulder, and she could feel me like right next to her, like my shoulder, my face or my chin is like over her shoulder, and then she felt this exhale next to her ear. And so then in retrospect, and I'm running this through my mind, it's almost like, was that the breath that was stolen from me that gave them the energy to then exhale back on her?
Ooh,
I don't know, but
that's
it was just like,
interesting.
she swears, she goes, there was somebody there. I could feel it, and I could even feel the breath come back.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, they'll draw enough energy to where, but I've never thought about the breath, taking your breath and then expelling it back. That's fascinating. I've never even gave that thought.
Yeah,
Huh.
like I said, I had no expectations going in, and for something like that to
Right.
happen, it's such an unusual phenomenon too.
Yes.
And my wife
Oh,
is fairly sensitive too. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call her a medium, but she's sensitive, and she's had many experiences where she'll see things and stuff that I don't see. I'm just oblivious to. They have to push me over for me.
where you're like, okay, I get your point now. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But so and speaking of mediums, 28 Years Haunted is the story of Brandy Marie Miller, who's the star of the hit Netflix series 28 Days Haunted, which you can still see. And I recommend people watch the series and then read the book, because I have some spoilers and some great behind the scenes stories that you didn't make it on the air, because they only had 6 episodes, so they could only put in so much. And they had 3 different teams, each locked down in separate haunted locations for 28 days straight, because they're trying to prove the Warrens'
Bill in
28
the
Days
Rain.
Theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ed and Lorraine Warren, right? Their
Yeah.
theory. So basically, it's based on Amityville, where it took them 28 days before they were really able to kind of break through the veil to the other side, and to kind of solve what's going on there. But anyway, so again, they only had like 6 episodes for all that, but so I ended up meeting Brandy at that event where we were at Eloise. And so Todd Bonner, one of the founders, he reached out to me, I don't know, a few months after that event. And he had a production company that was interested in doing a series and to pitch to Travel Channel Discovery, based on the investigation of Eloise. So for a time, they had exclusive access to investigate this abandoned asylum. And so
Ooh.
he's like, but they want me to write a pitch. He goes, I don't know how to do that. He goes, you're a writer. Can you help me? I'm like, sure. And so for about 2 years, we developed a bunch of reality type TV shows. I mean, everything from, a lot of paranormal. We developed a true crime show, another show called Native Mysteries, and stuff. We signed co-production agreements with various production companies and stuff. And then COVID came and the lockdowns just killed everything. And by the time COVID was over, then you had the writers' strike and the other strikes, and then nothing was getting made. And then Discovery decided to do their own streaming service, so they're just re-upping the same stuff, not taking anything new. And then all of a sudden they did the merger with Warner Home Media, HBO Max, all that, and it just like, and finally just like, all right, I can't keep hold on to this. I gotta move on to something else. But anyway, but Brandy, she was the psychic medium that was there and part of their team, and so that's how I met her. And then she came back to me after she did the Netflix series and said she'd always wanted to tell her story of what it's like to since the time you're 5 see dead people and
Yeah.
communicate with the
Yeah.
spirit realm as a psychic medium. And at first, as a writer, you guys, I'm sure you've had this where everybody's like, oh, you need to write my life story, write my biography, or make a movie about me. And I'm like, most people aren't that interesting, no offense, but
Right.
when I talked to Brandy, she started telling me, all these things she experienced growing up and trying to come to grips with being a psychic medium. And then when she got into her 20s, actually going to the most haunted places in America, like Waverly Hills and Eloise and elsewhere, and just all the insane experiences she had. And then, of course, doing a hit Netflix series, it's like, yeah, I can work with that.
Well, yeah. You got a little bit more to go on
Yeah, so I mean,
than the
so many great
average
stories in
Joe,
there. And it's fun too, so like the first third's about her, from the time she was 5, there was the 2 different entities, it's almost like a battle for her soul between good and evil. There was the man in white,
Uh-huh.
and then there's the dingy man, who was terrorizing her and trying to convince her to do terrible things to her little brother. And it's just, again, so many wild stories like that. And then the middle section is all her experiences at some of the most, again, haunted places in America. And she's been on, a lot of different travel channel shows and stuff, Paranormal Caught on Camera, America's Most Haunted, stuff like a bunch of those shows. And with Jack Osborne, one of his shows, she's been on there too. Some of the things she's experienced. And then I also get into the history behind those locations. Like, why would this place be haunted? And then you find out the tragedies that happened there. Then you're like, okay, I can see
Yeah,
that.
now it makes sense. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Waverly Hills was atrocious.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, the creeper. Oh my gosh. I had so much fun describing the creeper.
I bet you did.
And
I
it's funny,
always
like,
like the Timmy and his little red ball. He'll play ball with you.
yes, yes. Again,
Yeah,
another tragic story.
yeah, yeah. But yeah,
But
that,
that
that
was interesting too, writing nonfiction. But basically, it was taking her stories and dramatizing them, but writing them from her point of view. But again, as a writer, you have your main character, and you basically are channeling them anyway.
right.
So fortunately, I got to know her, well enough that it made it easier to be able to write from her point of view.
Yeah, because you had the rapport. So That always helps. That's what we tell people about attending events and going to different conferences is the fact that networking is more important down the road than how many books you sell there or
Yeah.
what you do there, because networking, that is like invaluable. That's what you're there to do. Yeah, you got to pick up new readers. Yeah, you got to meet, but network, talk to people around you, talk to the other guests, the other, because you never know who somebody knows, you know,
Yes.
that'll come down the line and be like, oh, I could call so and so, and
Mhm.
they've got a pipeline to so and so, and then on and on and on,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
that's how we grow. We help each other, lift each other up.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
100%. We're not competing against each other. The more
Uh-uh.
that you can help others later on down the line, that gets paid back to you either directly or indirectly. And again, if you
Right.
ever do a panel on networking, I lived that. I go to this one, and I stepped out of my comfort zone to go to, Colorado to this horror writers retreat. You know, Again, I just did it because, hey, it's an excuse to go to the Stanley Hotel. But
Right.
Right.
even at that, there was a project that Rob was actually went on to pitch um, to some of the networks um, about he had the idea that how cool would it be to take horror writers and then put them in an actual haunted location and see how they react and explore and investigate and stuff like that. And so a bunch of us submitted stories for it and everything, and then it didn't end up getting picked up. So then it's like, oh, okay, that was a
Oh,
bust. Well, no. Later on, that led to me meeting Bridget Marquardt, which led to me meeting Todd, and then meeting Brandy. And
well, there
next
you
thing I know, I 28 years haunted. But that never would have happened if I hadn't stepped out of my comfort zone and
go. Right.
gone to that event and met Rob.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Connected
it's a
all the way
chain.
down.
It's a chain effect. That's what
Mhm.
I said. You never know down the line what that one networking person that you got in contact with is going to lead to. Where that network is going to lead to, a year, 2, 3 down the
Yeah.
road.
Yep.
Yeah, and whether
It's
Yep.
it's
invaluable.
what you put out on social media or just letting people know what you
Yep.
do, and
Mhm.
one way that holds you accountable, but also, again, that person might not be able to help you, but they might know somebody. Oh, I know somebody who's looking for that,
Exactly.
or
Mhm.
Yeah.
things like on
Mhm.
social media. I was on the panel on the Supernatural at StokerCon in San Diego last year, and an editor from a magazine reached out to me and saw that I was on there and said, "Hey, could you write an article about that experience and on the panel and everything?" But if I hadn't put that out there, bragging out on social media, that wouldn't happen. And
Right.
just last week, I was happened to be wearing a baseball cap that a friend from Texas who was a former homicide detective who I'd actually attached to this one true crime show that we pitched. Again, it went to ID Channel, Oxygen, Netflix, you name it. It was so close. Anyway, she gave me this baseball cap, and it was what was it called? Something about Texas and film on there. It's like Wild Texas Film Tour or something like that, And I was just wearing it, and when I met this guy who turned out to be an actor and director, and he asked me about it, and we started up a conversation, and then but the more we talked, and then I ended up, he's like, yeah, send that to me. I sent him, and now he's just like, he's already got a DP that he's reached out to, and he's already got
Nice.
some actors. He's already thinking about casting in the short
Mhm.
film, and it's like, and this comes through. Then you get into film festivals, and then back to networking.
Right. Right.
Right.
And that was all just from wearing a cap. Yeah.
Right,
No
exactly.
intention of, yeah, that's what's
Yeah.
said. It's fate is funny
Amazing
like that.
how
Yeah,
stuff
it
happens.
is.
Yeah.
But that's why you got to be open and talk to people. That's what we always tell people. You got to be your brand, represent yourself, everywhere you go. And you
Mhm.
just never know. You never know where
Mhm.
that next contact, will be.
And it's
Yeah. That's
tough if
why.
you're. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Now, I was going to say it's tough if you're an introvert, and people don't
Yeah.
believe me. But at my default setting as introvert, I'd rather just be, in my own room or office, writing or reading or watching scary movies or something like that. That's my happy place. That's my default setting.
Hmm.
But you have to kind of flip that switch, and I can flip the switch and play the extrovert. When I'm talking about something I'm passionate about, then it's like, it's hard to shut me up. you know,
Right.
but my
I
default
think
setting
we're
is an
all a little
introvert. So it's,
omniverted. Yeah, I think we're all a little omniverted. I think as creatives, because yeah, we like our quiet time to create and you know be in retrospect and think about things and because our brains never stop. So yeah, we like our solitude, but we also enjoy when we do get out there and start chit chatting and talking to like minded creatives. We enjoy that too because that gives us like it
Mhm.
energizes our batteries for until the next time.
yeah, but
Yeah.
that breaking the ice is the painful part, and you're just like, oh, just get out
Yeah.
there, just do it. But again, once you start talking to cool people like you guys, or you go to these
Oh,
conventions and stuff, and now you're with like-minded people that are passionate about, anytime I'm with creatives, whether they're artists or writers or anyone who's a creative, those are my people. And I just
yeah,
again, you kind of inspire each other, and both walk away energized, like you said.
that's
Yeah,
it.
it's been fun for me just from my perspective, running the convention, just to watch people that I absolutely know are introverts all come together and suddenly transform for 3 days into extroverts for
Yeah,
like a
it's
weekend.
fun.
It is wild to watch
Yeah,
that.
Yeah, the
it is.
whiskey helps a little.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that
it does. It
doesn't
never
hurt.
hurts.
Doesn't hurt. Yeah, or
No.
as you say, Tennessee whiskey, or as where we are, Kentucky bourbon. Yeah,
Bourbon.
Kentucky
anything
bourbon.
will work.
Okay, all right.
You're right.
We
So
Well,
live in the
well,
bourbon capital of the world. We're here
yes,
in Lexington, so
yeah.
we have our convention in Louisville, but we're actually in the bourbon capital of the world here. So
Well,
we're
yeah,
oh
literally
well.
surrounded with
In
like
Kentucky.
96% of
Yeah,
the world's bourbon.
I think it's
Well, if
90.
it's not
Yeah,
from
around
Kentucky, it's
95.
not technically bourbon. So
Exactly.
That's how
Exactly.
I feel. But yeah, I know it's not technically the rule. But yeah,
We agree. We agree.
yeah, we do agree with that. Absolutely. Um, But well, mention again for the audience that your book that you were just speaking of, uh, 28 Years Haunted, is the book that won the 2024 Imagine Award for nonfiction. So I wanted to make sure we got that in there because it is
Yes.
fantastic, and definitely recommend folks to pick that up. And coming up this fall, and I don't know how much you'd be able to share with us on it tonight, but you do have a new short story collection projected for release in the
Right.
fall.
Right.
What's
Talking
that?
about it.
Can you talk about the theme or anything like that?
it's it's horror, but it's basically Twilight Zone style fiction. Is probably the best way to describe it. But it's
Twilight Zone.
Twilight Zone, Creep Show, EC Comics. So if you like the Tales from the Crypt,
Yes, absolutely.
suspense tales, little Alfred Hitchcock. So um, it's going to be 13, perfect number, right? 13
Of
Right.
tales.
course.
Um, the working title right now is Ghastly Tales of Terror.
Hmm.
So
Ooh, I
it's going to be
like.
13 Ghastly Tales of Terror. So there's a variety. I would say probably two-thirds of them have already been published in various anthologies over the last several years. I don't know how many years now, maybe 8 years or so.
Hmm.
Um, and plus, I have a number of new ones. There's a couple that I'm writing as we speak. One of them is the short story, like I said, that hopefully, if all goes well, in talks here, will be turned into a short film. Um, but and other ones that there's one that was in Monsters, Movies, and Mayhem, that also was an award winner. And so it's kind of quite an eclectic group of stories, though. But again, they're all twisted tales in the EC Comics Twilight Zone Creep Show style.
Nice. Well, yeah, that could lead to another TV series
Yep.
for you.
Oh, I'm telling
Yep.
you, yeah, these would be great
They're all-
for actually for Creepshow, the one that's on Shudder, I wrote one of them. It's called Headhunter, that is actually going to be in an anthology coming up. I don't know if I'm allowed to actually say which anthology it's in, because I'm waiting for the official table of contents to come out.
Uh-huh.
We don't want
But
to get you in
that
trouble,
one,
so don't.
We don't
No
want to get you
pressure.
in trouble.
Yeah, no
yeah,
pressure.
right. So that's probably, I think it's going to drop around September, and it's called Headhunter. So this one features what do they call those? Shrunken Head. So it's a fun one.
Nice.
Oh,
Yeah, that
Nice.
one's really cool. And that one is, I actually wrote it with as if it were a creep show segment, with that in
Very
mind,
cool.
or Tales from the Crypt style there. So, but again, quite a variety. Some are there's some paranormal in there. There's there's even a serial killer story. There's even ones probably maybe considered a little more sci-fi. And so, but yeah, there's lots of twisted tales that if you like horror, if you like EC Comics, Twilight Zone, Creep Show, Tales from the
yeah.
Crypt, then I think you'll enjoy. There's a little something for everybody in this one.
Very much so. Yeah, I will be looking forward to that for sure. And very cool. It's got a lot of variety underneath that umbrella too. From what
And
you're
you're the
what you're
first.
discussing.
This is actually the first show that I've actually announced that. So I guess this is the official announcement. The cat's out of the bag.
Yeah, the scoop.
Well,
The scoop.
that's
You got the
Thank you.
awesome.
scoop, Stephen.
We
All
got
right.
the scoop.
Yes, we do. It's funny how it happens on the Star Chamber show that this
It
happens.
it
But
does happen.
it
We
is.
come up with great ideas and
Yeah,
and
sometimes
and
and sometimes we get scoops and yeah, lots
yeah.
of crazy stuff happens here. But
Hey,
thank you
live
for sharing.
shows, you never
Yeah.
know what's going to happen.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes when tornadoes come into your town, it can be very precarious on a live
And
show.
we
Other
still
times,
soldier
yeah,
through.
but we always soldier through. But thank you for sharing that. And
That's
and
cool.
I have really enjoyed getting a chance to visit with you tonight. This has been a blast, and I'm definitely going to have to put your short story collection on my radar as far as a book
Yeah.
to purchase. Yeah, this fall, because yeah, we'll have to catch up on that when we see you in July and see how if you got a definitive release date by then, hopefully. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I
keep us
don't know
posted.
if I'll have art copies available by
Mhm.
the time. I'm kind of hoping. So I will have a table in the main
Yeah,
expo area. So I will be
yeah.
selling and signing 28 Years Haunted, Eye for an Eye, and potentially might have some art copies. I'm not going to promise, because you never know. When
Right.
time's getting the cover done and all the rest, how that stuff goes. But if it's at all possible, I'll hopefully have a sneak peek of that there as well.
That is awesome. Yeah, I cannot wait.
Uh,
Cannot wait. And of course, to see you is going to be great. And both Holly and myself are looking forward to that very much. But before we wrap up the show, though, I do want to give you a chance to talk about anything that we may not have mentioned. I know we've talked about your short story collection. We've talked about 28 Years Haunted. We've talked about your novella collection and screenwriting. But if there's anything we haven't mentioned, we do allow you time. So yeah, feel free to mention that, and then also want to get your platform links so folks can find you.
Absolutely. So, yeah, we've talked about most of the stuff. Like I said, I do go back and forth between horror. Between prose and screenwriting. So I have another short film script that's already been written and has actually won, or at least been finalist in many screenwriting competitions. It's called Simon Says. And so I'm also working on the feature length version of that script. So, and hoping to parlay that, having seen what a great reaction I got from the short film script in so many different competitions, that I'd be remiss if I didn't write the feature length version of that. And that's going to be I'm really excited about that. And like I said, the short story collection that's coming up this fall, I'm really excited about that. That's, again, there's so many just different, unique takes and things that, it's very personal too, because so many of those stories have inspiration that have come from childhood or experiences. There's a paranormal one that was actually based on a true story that an old pastor friend of mine told me about growing up in a haunted house as a kid. And so
Nice.
he tells me about this experience, and then I feed that into my twisted imagination, and then it's like, there's a story. Or there's other ones that were inspired by road trips that I've taken. And just, and the other kind of cool thing I'm looking forward to doing is with each of the short stories, I'm going to have a little at the end of each one, just about, what inspired that story. So, people, as a writer, people say, where do you get your ideas? Well, it's not like, there's some idea factory that you just go to and you pay your price and you buy something. Ideas are everywhere. So I
That'd be
always find it
nice, wouldn't it?
right? Yeah, that makes it so much
Yeah,
easier.
yeah.
But I always find it fascinating. It's like, what inspired that specific story? Where did you draw
Mhm.
your inspiration from? And sometimes it's just something as simple as a phrase. Or one time I was just driving down on my way to work, and I drove past this one house, and there was something about it that just triggered an idea. I had one short story that's in there that I was driving from StokerCon in Las Vegas back to California, and I basically um, beat the story out, and my wife's taking notes, and by the time I got home, I had the story. So I wrote the story just on
Yeah,
a
Wow.
road trip from Vegas.
nice.
you know so there's always an interesting things that again, childhood experiences. Oh man, I have one called Wiggle Room that I'm currently writing that was inspired by a weird experience I had as a child, and so it's yeah, this that one definitely will make you squirm. All pun intended.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, how can folks find you? Because I want to make sure that folks connect with you and start picking up some of your titles.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of me, or to get a hold of my work, if you go to BD Prince, so it's B as in boy, D as in dog, Prince.com. That'll will direct you to my Amazon authors page, so you can see all the different anthologies I've been in, and and other books. If you go to ghastlypress.com, that's ghastlypress.com. You can get autographed copies of, or in personalized to you through there. On social media, I'm like Holly. I'm most active on Facebook. So I think it's brian.prince.52, brian.prince.52 is what they gave me. But on all the other socials, it's at Clown Prince B. So at
Mhm.
Clown Prince, Prince, B as in Brian.
Great, great. And this is hopefully just the first time of many visits with you on the
Yes.
show. Definitely want to have you back, and of course, keep up with you, and hopefully this fall we can visit with you when the new short story collection comes out. But I want to thank you for being on the show, and I am gonna turn it over to Holly so she can conclude with you and wrap up what's been a great night.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. And Holly, I do have a couple more uh, paranormal experiences that we can talk about next time.
Ooh. Well, we will talk about that in July. Yes, I definitely want to hear this.
And
We'll
on the
have
air.
we'll have some
Yeah,
bourbon.
yeah, and we'll get it on the air in the fall. Yeah,
There you
when it's
go, and then we'll
when it's
throw it
good.
on the air in
Yeah,
the fall. That's right. We'll
yeah.
rediscuss it then.
I
That
love
sounds
it. It's a
like a
date.
great time. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us here, and yeah, everybody. Find his table in the expo hall. If you can't find him, ask me. I will help you find him at Imaginarium. And check his titles out and sit and give him a chat. I'm sure you would love to answer any questions that they may have.
Oh, you know what? One quick thing. My
Yeah.
first published short story was in an anthology called Between the Lines that was edited by Michael Nost.
Yes. Yes.
Oh,
That is true. That is true. That is awesome. And
Yeah,
wow.
yeah,
so talk about
yeah,
coming
we
full
we helped
circle.
Michael. Yeah, we helped Michael get that one out. Yeah,
I
so
was going
that's
to say, so
yeah,
you're a published author with us. Find out
yeah,
something
Yeah,
all the time. See,
yeah, yeah. That's
well,
one of the ones.
small world, right?
yeah. It
Yeah,
was either my first or second published short story, I think.
that is
Wow.
awesome. Yeah, I didn't realize it was it was that
Yeah.
early. Yeah, for you. Yeah, that's awesome. As far as your what you've had published,
Well, that's
that's
so
pretty.
cool
That is
that we
Yeah,
so
were
see,
we
cool.
were able to
you go
help
back
with
further,
that.
you realize.
How cool.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing, all the tips and you know, things that you have for everybody and our listeners and our future listeners, not just our live listeners, but our playback listeners,
Oh yes.
um,
Mhm.
to help them in their paths. And be sure to, everyone out there, check out his Facebook.
Yeah,
And
and
so
site
I'll leave
and
you with
site.
that.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here, and you have a great evening.
You too. Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast.
All right. Good night. All right, listeners out there. Join us next Wednesday, same place, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Another great guest, another great chat. For the rest of the week, be creative. Good night, all.